I feel like this is going to be a long live stream. It's going to be a long video. There's a lot to cover. But the first thing I felt like I had to cover is honestly what everyone's kind of horrified by. The internet is so up in arms about this. Everyone's reacting to it, sharing thoughts. And I look at this and I'm like, well, this isn't what I do. I talk about movies. I talk about filmmaking, and I'm not in the music scene, right? And but as I've been thinking about it, I heard the song. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not paying attention to what this guy Kanye West is doing. I know that's not his name. I think he goes by Ye now, but I don't want to pay attention to this. All right. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's not because I like it. I actually really don't like it at all. I think it's honestly disgusting. I think it's kind of, I think it's misguided. I think it's motivated by a lot of mental illness. I think it's motivated by a lot of trauma and pain on his part. And obviously we've been seeing Kanye West crash out for well over 2 years now. And it's just very difficult for me to see him go from, releasing that album, Jesus is King, all the way to now this new album with this track, HH, I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. So yeah, before I jump into this, before I start sharing my thoughts around this and why I think I can't stop thinking about it, let me know in the comments, what was your first thoughts when you heard the song? Also, did you hear it at all? I think Twitter X is the only place you can find it. I think it's been scrubbed from most of all the social platforms, so you can't find it anywhere else. I'm a YouTube guy. I kind of live there, but I go over to X when things get, banned, I guess you might say. So I heard the song on X. I'm not going to play it, obviously. I'm definitely not going to play it, but I think in my meditation over this, I've been thinking about what are the social implications to this song, right? To not just this song, but the extension of what Kanye has been doing for the past year and a half, really. I mean, he's been going nuts, I feel like. And honestly, when I heard this song, when I hear about his interpersonal life, I think a big part of this as a dad is motivated by the fact that he's having so many legal issues with his family and his kids in particular. There's a lot more than that, but I think that's enough to see kind of the crash out that we're seeing from him. The point remains, why? Why is this getting so much traction? Why is he doing this? And the main reason is because he's super talented and popular, and he's like a huge troll. But that's not like the motivation that's not really the point as to why it's been lingering in my head. And I think I can define it this way, is art is a weapon. Whether it's music, whether it is filmmaking, it's a weapon, right? And it could be used for good. It could be used for bad. It could be used as a troll, which I feel like we see art just being a troll these days. And I think my conclusion to this point is it's dangerous. That doesn't mean you shouldn't say it. Actually, I'm a very free speech absolutist in a lot of ways. I think you should be allowed to say whatever you want. That doesn't make it right. Absolutely not. It doesn't make it his truth or any form of truth. All it makes it is their misguided, evil or good or whatever intentions they have. It's their opinion, and it's whatever's floating in their head. They shouldn't be in trouble for saying it, but you should also, be able to face the ramifications of the stuff you say by other people's ability to speak out and use free speech accordingly. So I'm not against that he produced this song. What I think should come of this, when I look at this song and I'm like, this is horrible. Why was this made? Why is he in this mindset? I know there's a lot of politics and stuff involved, but why? What can culture glean from this other than just saying like, well, he continues to go down this strange road? What should artists, right? Whether you're a fan of Kanye or you were in the past, or you're not, but you're in filmmaking or you're in music or whatever you do, if you work in art or have a hobby in art, how can you look at this and learn from it? I think the biggest thing you can learn from it is just because you have something to say doesn't make it right. I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to say it. What I'm saying is sometimes it's not worth saying. And I think you have to actually look at your upbringing, look at your values, look at the areas in which you've chosen to orient your life. For me, that's kind of Christian values. I'm a man of faith, and so a lot of my morality is built on what the Bible has to say about morality and my salvation and my relationship with God. And what we see from Kanye is that a few years back, he professes Jesus as king, as his king. He was doing Sunday service, right? He was all about Christianity, all about God, all about Jesus. And then just a few years later, he's doing a song like this. I mean, just a far fall. And I know there's a lot of reasons for that, but just because you have something to say doesn't make it right, and you need to orient yourself to a strong foundation for what you are going to say. Because again, art is a weapon. Just because a lot of people say something doesn't make it right. We look at, a lot of culture is split right now in the culture war over a lot of kind of the humanistic woke ideologies that come out of places like Hollywood or come out of universities, right? And then there's this, whether it's online, whether it's the everyday man, whether it's people that are just not even that political, they just kind of live either center right or center left, and they just think the extremes are crazy. Just because there's a lot of voices like in Hollywood that talk about these progressive ideas does not make it the right thing. Just because somebody feels a certain way does not make it right. So when you're an artist, you kind of create on how you feel. And there could be a lot of beauty in processing and going through dark emotions. And I don't know, maybe we'll look back and say, hey, there was some cringy moments in Kanye's history, and that song was a very dark place that he was at, but maybe it'll all be turned around for good. I don't know. I'm not a predictor of the future, nor do I care enough to really give him the benefit of the doubt. And there is a art form to creating a process to telling a story, but you have to be careful on what you're messaging out there, because although not everything you have to say is worth saying, some people will listen to you and take you very seriously. Some people are going to buy into that message. Some people are going to swallow the pill wholeheartedly and enthusiastically. Whether it's because you have influence, whether it's because you really spoke to them on a emotional level, and so they adopt those ideas onto themselves and kind of create, their own personhood around a story or a piece of art. You just have to be careful. And so especially if you're an artist, I look at this and I think the thing I'm taking away from how much this song is just the complex emotions that it makes you feel, and how dark it is, right? How incredibly insane this song is, not in a good way. Think about your own creation. Think about how you consume art. Think about how you create art. And find a foundation. Bring morals. Bring your own moral foundation. If you don't have one, hey, if you don't have a foundation of morality that you bring into art, then in my opinion, your art isn't really, it's not that it's not beautiful. What it is discombobulated. It looks kind of like what we see from Kanye, right? Because in one album, a few years back, he has one mindset. A few years later, he has another mindset. He's doing songs like this, and it's just all over the place. And it's because you're guided by your emotions, where I think true art has a level of emotional expression and a foundation of moral principle that are playing this beautiful dance together, right? And it's not just 100% emotion, and it's not just 100% morals, because either one can be dangerous and the other one can be boring, right? And so it's this really beautiful dance that I think artists really need to consider. And if this is valuable to you, let me know your own thoughts in the comment below. If anything I'm saying makes sense or resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. With all that said, I wanted to talk about this because I think this is super valuable for people who are artistic in any way, because there's always lessons to be learned. Now, let me jump into something that's a little bit lighter, right? That's actually, more along the lines of what I normally talk about. The Superman trailer, James Gunn's Superman trailer, has come out, and I have a feeling that everybody in DC, a lot of people in the Hollywood superhero world, is really holding their breath for this film. I think everything's kind of riding on the Superman film. So let's go ahead. I want to watch the trailer with you. Let's try this out.
Are you being serious right now?
Yeah.
You'd let me interview you as Superman.
Sure.
Ready?
Let's do it, Cronkite.
Superman.
Miss Lane.
Hey,
Recently,
I'll say this.
Come on.
I like the way he's conducting himself. He feels like a confident, normal man, right? That so far, I like the vibe.
Under a lot of fire for what some
it's
might.
A lot of fire,
it's a lot. Today, the Secretary of Defense said he was going to look into your actions. That's funny?
My actions? I stopped a war.
Maybe.
Not maybe. I did.
In effect, you illegally entered a country.
This is how you're gonna be?
I'm not the one being interviewed, Superman. Did you consult with the president?
No.
You seemingly acting as a representative of
I
the
wasn't
United States will
representing
cause
anybody
more
except for me.
problems around the
And
world.
doing good.
I love the buildup of this trailer. The start with a very casual, very kind of one-on-one setting. We know we're going into a Superman story. We're curious what's going to be the story behind this. It's leading up to something as she's questioning. The tensions are rising, not just with the music and the sound effects, but also the visuals. And it's starting to show us a little bit of what's going on. It's telling a story, right? It's telling a story and it's building to something. I'm really liking it.
I would question myself in the same situation and consider the consequences.
People were going to die.
And the climax right there, it's the people are going to die, right? That speaks directly to the moral foundation of Superman, right? So it's building up to what is underneath, right? I like it.
Hey, buddy. Eyes up here.
Your choices, your actions. That's what makes you. who you are.
There are so many characters.
He's not a man. He's an it. He's somehow become the focal point of the entire world's conversation.
Soundtrack is awesome.
I will not accept that.
I cleaned your boots. I'll go get them for you.
What?
You have a dog?
July 11th. All right. There's a lot to this. I'm just going to say I love everything about this trailer. I love the way it's constructed. The biggest issue I have is all of these different villain characters. Like I'm a little concerned that there's going to be a level of this that's kind of hokey when it comes to the villains and everything. There's not like that grounding principle that I really enjoy from, like Man of Steel, like the Chris Nolan Batmans a little bit. I know it's Superman. I know he deals with aliens because he is one. But I'm just saying there's a lot going on with the villains that I'm seeing in this trailer, and I'm a little concerned about that because if it gets too spacey, and I don't mean like just space, but like if it literally gets too disconnected from reality, then it's asking a little too much for believability's sake, right? Like the giant, whatever that thing was, the giant monster here, I don't know what I think about it. This right here, like that just in a city? There's a lot on this film. I think my first reaction is, look, I think it's actually going to do really well. I do think it's actually going to do really well because James Gunn tends to deliver fun, relatively emotionally, well-told stories. It has a lot of heart to it. The Guardians of the Galaxies. I don't think his stories have like a crazy amount of depth. I think they can be very funny. I don't know that he ever makes awesome movies. I don't think I've seen anything that James Gunn has done that I thought was just awesome, but nor do I see a lot of stuff that he's done that I'm like, that's just a bad film either. So it's kind of this middle of the road that tends to do well for the global audience, that tends to make a lot of money, but is not necessarily the best in the game. One thing that James Gunn, this is like 6 or 5 months ago, I saw this. This is like his rationale. He's approaching Superman, what he thinks is going to be interesting about this particular Superman story.
I don't think we've ever seen the big science fiction Silver Age Superman aspects that we have in our movie, and we've never seen we've never seen this. You'll see when the movie comes out. Okay. We've never seen this specific part of Superman's life.
Okay. I spoke. Nick Holt just did the podcast the other day, so we talked a bunch about, of course, Superman, and the casting experience. I
don't think we've ever seen the Lex like that. That Nick is. Nick is.
That the Lex Luthor. I am very interested. I think Lex Luthor is a for Superman. Lex Luthor is a super interesting arch nemesis. It's really cool. So I am excited to see how Lex Luthor plays into all of this, and at what point in the story of Superman are they entering the story, right? Are they popping in with flashbacks? I don't know.
He's imposing. You go, oh, fuck, poor Superman. That's the thing that we never see. We don't, and not in film. Sometimes in the comics, you go, "Oh, Superman's fucked because Lex is so smart and so good at what he's doing."
Right.
But in the movies, you're going, "Lex is about to get fucked." You know,
That's a really good point. Yeah, I would say that when it comes to Superman, Lex, in the stories that I've seen, Lex Luthor is always kind of relying on like good timing to kind of get the upper hand. But really, Lex Luthor was always about, he's just way too smart. That's why he is the ultimate villain to counter Superman, is because he's really smart. And every Lex Luthor is kind of portrayed as like, yes, he's smart, but also he just has really good timing. You know what I mean? He gets lucky a few times, gets the upper hand, but never just kind of like just smart. Like, he doesn't have to try too hard with Superman because he's just way superior in his intellect. This is kind of why I think that everyone's watching this film. Although I think this is probably going to be $1 billion superhero film, which in some ways I kind of want it to just perform slightly okay if it's a good film. If it's bad, I want it to flop, obviously. I don't want to prop up and give false data. If it's bad, I want everyone to know it and express it, and I want them to hurt when it comes to income. But if it's good, I almost don't want them to win too hard, because it's just going to pick the wave up again and say, hey, they actually do like superhero films. And they just keep trotting out, both Marvel and DC will just keep trotting out these subpar superhero films that ultimately crash and burn, right? Because, I mean, if any superhero film's going to make it, it's going to be Superman. That's what I think. If any superhero film is going to work, it's got to be Superman, which is why I think the combination of James Gunn, what I'm seeing from this trailer, and the fact that it's Superman, I think it's going to work. But if you take a look at, the past years of the DC hits, Man of Steel, back in 2013, did really well. $225 million budget, and they brought in over $600 million. That's pretty good. And it kind of lives like that for a few films. Even Suicide Squad did really good. I think around Suicide Squad, people started getting a little bit of a clue that it might get a little corny, that it wasn't exactly what they thought it was doing. Wonder Woman did really well. It was a decent Wonder Woman film. The first one, anyway. And then Justice League came in, right? The Zack Snyder ripoff, I guess, where they replaced it. That was a big flop. People hated that one. Aquaman came in and blew everyone out of the water, partly because it's Aquaman, it's Jason Momoa. I wouldn't say the film deserved those numbers, but it got those numbers because of the novelty. This is when you start to see things fall off. Shazam does pretty good, but not like huge, right? Birds of Prey does pretty good. People really didn't like that film. They thought it was horrible. Wonder Woman, all right, didn't even bring in the full budget. And this doesn't include marketing, by the way. This is not marketing. So that's a flop. Then you have the Suicide Squad. I guess this is the next one. I think the one with the Punisher, probably, I guess. Yeah, 2021. And it doesn't break its budget, okay? So it flops. You have Black Adam, barely gets over its budget, so they're kind of breaking even with this one if you consider the marketing budget for Black Adam. Shazam, Fury of the Gods, again, breaking even, a little less than with marketing. The Flash, we're just struggling here. These budgets are inflated and they're not bringing in the kind of money. And then you have Blue Beetle, where they did less than breaking even again. And then Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, where they did about double, I guess, what the budget is, but maybe a little bit less. They probably got about 90 million from that film when it's all said and done for the box office, the global box office. So with that said, we've just had flop after flop after flop when way back in 2013, 2015, 2016, and 17, we were seeing hits. In 2018 with Aquaman, everything was going good until all these recent films. So with that, they brought in James Gunn to say, hey, we need someone to save us because we keep producing flops. And this, directed by James Gunn, also managing the DC universe in Warner Brothers, right? You come in, and this is kind of his big moment. This is kind of the thing that's like, hey, is this actually going to be something that James Gunn can turn around? Can he save DC? Is the strategy going to work? Is this big old Superman film directed by James Gunn going to cut it? I'm going to put my numbers, I'm going to bet my odds and say yes. This is probably, like, this could be $1 billion film. I think it has a high probability of being a $1 billion film. Maybe make more than, say, Aquaman. I think it has a potential to be bigger than Aquaman. The problem with that is, will people get out to the theaters and watch this? And will people watch it multiple times? That's where the real question is. And if this does fail, then I don't think anything can work, if I'm being honest with you, because how do you not, if you can't make Superman work, you can't really make anything work. At least that's my opinion. All right, we're going to talk some more. I have a couple more really fascinating topics to get into. But before I do that, if you wouldn't mind, whether you're watching on YouTube, Rumble, if you're listening or watching on Spotify or wherever you watching this right now, if you wouldn't mind hitting subscribe or follow, I'd really appreciate it. And also leave a comment on any platform you're watching. I'd love to know you're here. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your recommendations on ideas and topics I should talk through. Would love to interact with you in the comments and let me know that you're here and listening or watching. Really appreciate it. All right. This next topic is something that I was really debating. After I watched this, I was debating, should I actually talk about this? Do people that want to watch me actually want me to talk about this? And I just went with, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about Bad Thoughts, Tom Segura's new comedy series on Netflix. It is 6 episodes long, and it is just, it's like a mix and mashup of kind of short films, right? That's kind of what it is. First off, I want to say that I think that Tom Segura might be the smartest man in comedy. I think Tom Segura is quietly, like, no one really talks about this, but I think he's actually the smartest man in comedy, and I'm going to lay out some reasons why. If you don't know Tom Segura and you just like maybe seen his face on Netflix for a comedy special, this guy has quite a lot behind him that the public eye, at least not his followers, that the general public doesn't know that's behind him. And that's what makes this show so incredibly surprising to me. When I watch this show is difficult to watch. It's extremely hard to watch. There was moments that I was crying, laughing, and there was moments I was reaching for the remote to say, like, enough of this. I'm done with this. This is too much. I would not necessarily recommend this show at all. For reasons, it's extremely adult. It's as adult as you can get, but there are hilarious moments in this. And if you're a fan of Tom Segura's podcast that he does with his wife, Christina P., Your Mom's House, this show is kind of like very much the culture of their podcast. It's very crude It's very edgy. It's very gross. It's kind of exploring the funny yet grotesque side of humanity in a lot of ways. They find a lot of humor in that, and that's what this show is really highlighting in a lot of ways, and it's just taken to the extreme. Now, with that said, there was a moment he's good friends with Joe Rogan. He went on Joe Rogan's podcast, and they were having a conversation like they usually do. He was promoting the new show, and there was this moment close to the beginning that I thought was super interesting to hear Tom Segura talk about, and I thought it was super valuable because he's a comedian that was interested in film and then in comedy film, right? In the writing and whatnot, and the creation and directing. And then he pivoted to stand-up comedy because he had better opportunities in that than he did in film. And now he's saying, I've reached like whatever height I want to be at in comedy. Now I want to put my focus back on where I actually really loved being, which is the creation of film, right? But this was an interesting place where he broke down his thought process on filmmaking and writing. Take a listen.
There's something about doing comedy that's offensive or even potentially offensive.
Yeah, the other thing is there's the offensive angle. I also think that they really shit the bed on literally backing truly funny material. Like so many studio comedies that are.
So right now they're talking about how studios have not supported good comedy movies and shows, and they kind of lost money, and the genre of comedy films and whatnot's kind of plateaued, or there's not a lot of money in it because they haven't seen a lot of success from those genres. And he's basically making an argument that they approached it wrong. They focused on the wrong things.
Are released. The critics, people are like, why didn't this work? Because it's not good. It wasn't funny.
Right.
It's not a funny comedy.
But don't you think part of that is because they can't take any real chances?
Yeah, I think a studio is always, like if you strip everything down, it's somebody that has to have some risk in their job. They're playing with millions of dollars and saying like, this will make us money.
Right.
And so, yeah, they start to get more apprehensive about it. The other thing is that the cost of some of these comedies, when comedies were really thriving last, which was I think like more than 20 years ago, some of these comedies started to cost like 30 million plus to do a comedy. Yeah, because sometimes you had like huge stars and huge set pieces, and you'd have these enormous budgets. Yeah, like real. And now some of them, like Tropic Thunder, I think.
And I think that's when Hollywood was a bit more dangerous. Now I know Tropic Thunder was kind of an anomaly film, but if you even think back to the early 2000s, like they had some really funny comedies, even not the adult ones. Like even they had some really funny PG comedies. I mean, that were like family-friendly comedies that were getting a lot of attention because they were actually written funny. And then they kind of lost their way because they started producing stuff that wasn't really funny. They started making it more about the funny actor than maybe the writing. I think he's about to make an argument for the writing.
I think did probably pretty well at the box office, right? But a lot of them would not. And so it started to be like, hey, you know what? We can make this. That's why you see the explosion of certain genres, right? Like horror really has had a huge uptick the last decade.
I've been talking about this on this channel for a while. Horror is like a perfect genre for low budget filmmakers or indie filmmakers because you can make something that looks and sounds and feels very professional and scary and accomplish your goal without it being too cheesy and not have to spend a lot of money at all on it. Like, and Hollywood has done the same. Hollywood will make horror movies for $2-5 million easy, and that film will earn $50 to $100 million, right? So it's definitely a fact, and I think the point he's making is very similar with comedy.
Plus, because people can produce them for $5 million, but they don't realize that you can produce great comedies for $5 million also. You can, but you have to like prioritize the material first. It's got to be a great script, and they got to be willing to back it. You know, and I feel like they just haven't taken those shots yet.
So you have to be willing to back it. I think he's basically putting the blame on the studios. They're saying that they did not prioritize the writing. They did not take a chance on actually funny comedy because it might be too edgy. And then you look at this show and it's like Netflix. I do not know how on earth Netflix said yes to this show, because it is as edgy as it gets, I would say. This show is rough to watch. It had me crying, laughing in some moments, and in other moments, I was so uncomfortable that I wanted to run away from the TV. That's what this show is. I haven't seen anything like it. Why is Tom Segura, though, in my opinion, the smartest comedian in comedy? What about him sets him apart? Well, I've already mentioned he has a podcast, right? The interesting thing about his podcast is that he doesn't just have his podcast. He also has his friend's podcast on the same network. Like Two Bears, One Cave is Tom and Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura. On the same channel, you have Your Mom's House, which is the flagship show that is Tom and Christina, his wife. On the same channel, you have Rob Eiler, and I'm spacing on her name, but it's the two kids from The Sopranos. They're really good friends with Tom and Christina, so they have their own podcast on Your Mom's House network. So he's built different than any other comedian, different than any business, really. They have a whole comedy podcast network that is on the same channel, and so it cross promotes each other. He's been doing this for a long time. This is not something new. He's been doing this for well before COVID, so probably 8 years at this point, where they've had multiple shows on the same channel promoting each other and building up this culture of podcast comedy. And I would say, if I was to say who's had the biggest impact on comedy podcasting, I would say it's obviously Joe Rogan. You have people like Theo Vaughn, and then you have people like Your Mom's House. And then you have this new wave like Tim Dillon and Flagrant, right? And Bad Friends and whatnot. There's this new wave of podcasts. It's been around for 4 or 5 years, but they started and became really popular. But they started because people like Tom and Christina were doing podcasting and Joe Rogan was doing podcasting, right? So you have this core group of comedians who started the idea of podcasting, who really got in early. And then Tom is the only one who thought, let's build this out as a business and not just kind of like something we do on the side next to our comedy. I think a big reason for that is because he went into entertainment comedy with the intention of doing entertainment films. And then he found that it was more lucrative and better for exposure and better for his career to go the stand-up route. Now that he's reached a peak, he now has opportunities that almost anybody, if Tom wasn't Tom Segura, if he didn't have a core foundational audience of hundreds of thousands of people that come to see his podcast every single week, a show like this would not be greenlit. But because he has 4 or 5 comedy specials that have been successful on Netflix, and he has a track record of saying hey, my audience is online. My audience is in the podcast, the creator economy space. They're in my own business. I'm not just a lone wolf comedian who relies on the networks to get me exposure. I went and got my own exposure. And now I've built an entire business, not just on the fact that I have an audience, but on the fact that I've made smart business decisions through the process. And I think even what he's saying, where he's able to dissect an issue with the industry in Hollywood and say, the issue where they screwed up is they didn't prioritize the writing. That's just a glimpse into allowing to see how he thinks as a businessman, right? What works? What is the important thing here? He prioritized comedy over comedy filmmaking because it was better at the time for him. Then he prioritized creating a audience online through a podcast. He basically said, hey, this is like, we can benefit from bringing on other personalities. So not only does he have his own shows with his friend Bert, and they capitalize on that in a major way, Two Bears, One Cave, but then you also have his core podcast with his wife and all these other podcasts. So it's like, hey, this is how we have the most synergy inside of the comedy space, right? The adult comedy space in the creator economy. Let's build up a really like a cultish, right? Cult following online. And then that has launched him to be like literally the boat that he stands on top of that is able to sail around and give him all the opportunities where instead of trying to swim across the ocean, he's able to sail across it, right? And I think with Bad Thoughts, this is a show that nobody would greenlight. I'm positive of it. This thing's way too edgy, but because it's Tom Segura and he has audience of people that are going to watch it, and because he's been smart and prioritized the stuff that matters in the modern world, in the modern realm of entertainment, really, it's allowed him to get opportunities he wouldn't have before. So, lesson from this, I mean, focus on what actually matters. As like for me as a filmmaker, if you're a filmmaker or you're an artist or you're in some field, like what actually moves the needle? What's actually, if you look at technology, you look at the viewing behaviors of audience members, if you look at in your industry where the money is and what areas are, generating the most amount of income for your business, actually focus on what matters and stop focusing on all of the noise and get while the getting's good. Even if it feels like you're trying something early and it might not work for 10 years, well, in 10 years, yourself will thank you, right? I'm sure Tom today, at the release of this wild show, Bad Thoughts, is probably very thankful for Tom Segura 10 years ago, where he prioritized doing the podcast with his wife and building out this company and not trying to stay in film when he knew he needed to get out and do something different for a while before he can come back to film with a vengeance in a lot of ways. He can actually come in roaring instead of just treading water the whole time until he eventually sinks because he didn't have that core audience. So focus on what matters, even if it's the unorthodox path to take in a specific field. That's what I would say. I have another really cool topic, and this is kind of around the world of filmmaking. So this is where I would say filmmakers probably get the most value out of it. I usually save this for the end because it's like, hey, if you're a filmmaker, an indie filmmaker like me, if you're obsessed with the craft and the world of filmmaking, this is probably the area for you. This is probably like the kind of videos that you want to watch and definitely something that will fascinate you. But there's been some movement in the past few days around the film industry, in the business realm, and in the legal realm in a lot of ways too. Hollywood is not filming in California anymore. So why is that? Now, it's not that they don't film anything in California, but the majority of projects that Hollywood studios are producing are not filmed in California. Why is that? A lot of people know, but some people may not. Some people might not know, like, what does the whole tax credit system thing mean, right? That could be very confusing unless you have an idea of what that means. Well, the recent news that's very fascinating is that New York, right, who's always been the opposite to California as like the film industry, they have raised their tax credit for the state annually to $800 million. So basically, if you don't know what a tax credit is, certain states in the United States and even in Europe, like Europe has some good tax credits as well because they're trying to get the film industry out there. There's film industry tax credits where basically when you spend money in the state as a production, you can either get reimbursed at a certain percentage of the amount of money spent in the state, or for tax credit purposes, right? So you pay a sales tax when you order equipment, and then you have to meet the threshold to qualify for the tax credit, which a lot of times for like the state of, I believe it's New York, I think the minimum is $1 million. So you could be a smaller film and still get the tax credit. But basically, you get a certain percentage of the money spent reimbursed back to you. And it's just to incentivize, hey, we are wanting this amount of money, like this industry that spends a lot of money, the Hollywood system that's made up of the main studios, we want them to come to our state and spend money in our state that gets the cash moving. We want these big spenders to spend money here, right? And New York and California has always been the place where those big money spenders in Hollywood have spent money. But in recent years, with the taxes and the costs and the legislation and everything in these states being so incredibly ridiculous and inflating, there has been certain states like Georgia, the state that I live in, around Atlanta, that's kind of built up a reputation to say, hey, we have pretty good film tax credits here. And in the long run, you can actually get more out of your production, spend less if you just film in Georgia and spend money on the production in Georgia. People like Tyler Perry built his whole studio out here for those reasons. And so he actually gets a ton of business from Hollywood. This is a breakdown. I don't think the New York numbers are updated because this is news, how they raised from, I think it was 700 million annually to 800 million. So they added an extra 100 milli on top of what their tax credit is annually already. So basically, like, a state will give you a percentage based on how much your budget was, how much you spent in the state. They'll give you a credit back. And then once they reach, like if 200 films causes the state to reach 800 million, then it's cut off. But they raise it so high to say, hey, we have a lot of money dedicated to give films breaks, to incentivize spending money in the state. You look at California, they have 20% spending in labor, 5% uplift for out of zone, right? So around 20% tax credit if you think about it in basic terms. In New York, you have a 30% tax credit. What's interesting about that is in Georgia, you have a 20 to 30% tax credit. And apparently, there's also some other incentives inside of Georgia that is called transferable. And so there's certain benefits to being able to have transferable tax credits in certain states. So like California is not necessarily a transferable, it is a refundable tax credit. And then you have New York that is also a refundable. But then you have places like Georgia that if you work the numbers out, you actually save more by, filming in Georgia. You got like Pennsylvania that has a 25%. You have Montana that's a 20 to 25. Utah that's 20. So a lot of states have tax credits. But what's interesting is that very few states reach that 30% mark. And Georgia ranges from 20 to 30, and New York is right at 30, but you also have to take into consideration the amount of costs associated with spending money in New York because things tend to be more expensive there, right? So there's a lot of money that can be saved filming in Georgia, and you get a higher tax credit. So you can buy more and get a competitive credit back. So that is a basic understanding of how the tax credits work. So why is everyone fighting for attention? Why are all the states saying, hey, we need to film outside of California? Why are places like Georgia, where I live, the past like 10 years or so, maybe more, trying to say, hey, we should get the film industry to come here, right? That's what they've been doing. They've been saying, hey, we want the film industry to come here. So why are they doing that? Well, it's clear that they want money spent here, but hey, also, California is no longer a good place to film. it's also happening because people are realizing it. Hey, we don't need to film in one spot. We could film anywhere. In fact, we want to be able to go anywhere to film our movies. The reason why California was the place where Hollywood got set up is because the weather predictability, right? There was a lot of logistics, more than there are now when it came to filmmaking, because it was very delicate. Filmmaking back then, back in the day, was very delicate. It had to be very predictable. You had to have big sound stages. The equipment was extremely expensive and could be ruined or messed up super easily. You didn't have time to, get delayed by weather and all of that. And so it was just, you needed a place that was predictable to film at. And California had a variety of landscapes. So it had the ocean, it had deserts, it has mountains. And it's like, okay, the weather's great here. It's more predictable than other states. Also, it has this large variety of landscapes and different types of areas inside of the state. We'll just set up shop here in California. And honestly, that's like a really smart move. California was probably the best place to set up the film industry when it was taking off. Now, with the creator economy and how you can become famous like Mr. Beast in North Carolina. You can get more people watching your video film content, if you call that film, but you can get more people to be entertained by your video media than Hollywood does on a regular basis. Mr. Beast gets more eyeballs across the globe than Hollywood does. Like on a one-to-one comparison, right? Maybe not collectively, but on one-to-one comparison, Mr. Beast beats them. He beats the major studios. And he does it through YouTube. And so YouTube and the creator economy motivates the entire industry to kind of adapt. So the film industry and these big spenders in Hollywood, places like Disney, Warner Brothers, right? Paramount, they've been struggling for a long time, but they're still there. They're kind of saying, hey, we need to be able to move. We need to be able to save money where we can. We need to be able to have incentives, and we can kind of go anywhere. We have offices here in California, but it's not financially smart to film things here, because if we go film it in Georgia and even New York, now that they're competing, you're just going to get more bang for your buck, right? And there are even other states that you could probably get really good returns on. It doesn't have to be Georgia or New York or California alone. You can see from this map, there's a lot of states that have incentives and like 25% tax credits. But it has to go somewhere, right? And there's benefit to it being in a centralized place, like Atlanta, Georgia, like New York City, like Los Angeles, because that's where everyone can kind of build around, right? I thought that was super fascinating to see that the world of filmmaking, it's been doing this for years, well over a decade now, but more and more we're seeing states saying, like, as California's like, hey, we don't want to lose the industry, the film industry. What can we do to keep them? Well, states that have been competing for the attention of the film industry are now raising their attractiveness at the same time that California is trying to. California just can't keep up. They can't keep up with the demand of what the Hollywood system needs, where the money's being spent, how films are being made these days. It needs ways to save money as much as possible. And more Hollywood, the entertainment industry, is being influenced by the creator economy, and the creator economy doesn't live inside of cities. It doesn't live inside of state borders. Really, what it lives wherever it wants, because it's online. And with that, I think I'll end this. Thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment if you have any thoughts or ideas or want to discuss anything about any of the topics I talked about in this video. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you spending your valuable time with me today. I hope I brought some value to you. Give me a like if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.